So over the years, communication scholars have come up with many different models to try to explain what is happening in a communication setting, what's happening when public speaking is taking place. And your book talks about a few of these different models. They talk about the linear model and the interactional model. But today I want to focus on the transactional model of communication, or the transactional model of public speaking, because I believe that this model is the most inclusive model of all of them, and it's the one that I think explains the process of public speaking the best. So in the transactional model, individuals are sending and receiving messages at the same time. These messages are being exchanged simultaneously. And it assumes that meaning is co-created by the people that are interacting with each other. So as you can see from this model, there's a lot happening here. So let's talk about each of these different aspects of the transactional model of communication. So first and foremost, we have the source, also known as the speaker. And this is the person who is presenting an oral message to a listener. It's the person who's doing the public speaking. And in a classroom setting, the teacher is generally seen as the source, right? The teacher is the one who is giving a public speech, who is giving the lecture. So the source sends a message, and the message is whatever a speaker communicates to someone else. Now, your goal is to make sure that the message that you intended to send to the audience is the one that they actually receive. Because oftentimes, we say things incorrectly or things processed differently for our listeners, so we want to make sure that whatever it is that we're communicating is received in the way that we intend it to be. So things like our verbals and our nonverbals have to match, but we're going to talk about that in a lot more detail in the coming weeks. So the source sends a message through what we call a channel. And the channel is simply the means by which a message is communicated. So in a public speaking setting, usually, or let's go with a lecture setting. In a lecture setting, the source is giving the message, they're giving the lecture, and usually that lecture is received via an audio-visual channel. So the receivers are listening to the message via their ears, and they are watching a lecturer give a speech. Now, this is a little bit different, this online class, because you're still receiving a lecture from the source, from myself, and the lecture is my message. But the channel, in this case, is this video. It's YouTube, because you are now watching a video. This is what we call mediated communication. And messages can be sent through all kinds of different channels. So they can be present and in-person, audio-visual in that way. They can be mediated via YouTube, they can be on television, they can come through a radio, those sorts of things. And so the channel is basically just the means by which the message gets sent. This video is the channel for this lecture. Now, the source sends a message through a channel to receivers or listeners, audience members. The receiver is the person who receives the speaker's message. They are the ones who listen to the speaker's message. And everything that the speaker says is filtered through what we call the listener's frame of reference, or their field of experience. And this field of experience simply talks about how a person's culture or their experiences, their hereditary, all of those sorts of things influence their ability to communicate with one another. In order for meaning to occur, we have to have some sort of shared experience. We have to be able to understand each other and be able to understand the different various experiences that each other has had. Because no two people have the same frame of reference. No two people have had the same exact experiences. Take this for example. If you think of a cat, what do you think of? You might think of Garfield. You might think of Tom from Tom and Jerry. You might think of some other random cat. Maybe it's your own cat. But let's say that as a speaker, I was talking about a tiger. That's probably not what you thought of when I said the word cat, because you and I are coming from different frames of reference. So we have to make sure that our frames of reference are matching up so that our messages are interpreted the way that we want them to be. So we have to think about our audience and the experiences that they've had, as well as, and how those kind of like interact with our own experiences. So the source sends a message through a channel to receivers, who then send feedback back to the source. So this feedback are messages that are sent by the receivers that send some kind of message to the source. Usually, these messages are nonverbal. So think about it like you are sitting in a lecture. And as the teacher is lecturing, you are nodding your head to demonstrate that you understand what the teacher is talking about. Or you're kind of furrowing your eyebrow and you have a confused look on your face. And that message communicates that you don't understand what just happened, and maybe the teacher needs to explain further. So these are all different types of feedback that we can send to a source. Applause also counts as feedback because it demonstrates that we enjoyed the thing that we just listened to. Or if we boo someone off of a stage, that's another form of feedback because we're sending the message that we did not enjoy the message that we just received. So the receivers are sending lots of nonverbal feedback, usually nonverbal. Now there's a couple other things that are happening in this whole cycle, right? And all of this is happening simultaneously. The source is sending a message through a channel to receivers who are sending feedback, and so on and so forth. But there's a couple of other things that are happening here. The first is what we call noise. And noise is anything that interferes or impedes with the communication of a message. So in this situation here, where the speaker is at a lectern with a microphone, let's say that the microphone stopped working. That would be a form of noise because it's anything that stops the message from being received. So if the microphone stops working, suddenly the source can't be heard by the receivers. So that's a form of noise because it stops the message from being received. Other forms of noise happen internally, right? Something like a microphone not working or it being staticky or something, that's what we call external noise. Internal noise is what's happening in the minds of the receivers. So for example, let's say that you're giving your speech at noon and no one's eaten lunch yet. This guy right here, he's probably thinking about is how hungry he is, right? So that's what we call internal interference. It's things like wandering thoughts, closed-mindedness, right? The unwillingness to listen to certain messages, those sorts of things. So noise can be both internal as well as external. Finally, we have the situation here. And the situation describes what's happening in this instance, in this communicative instance. So this includes things like the time and place in which speech communication occurs. And these things matter, right? So the time and place that the speech happens matters. So for example, you would speak very, very differently at a football game rather than in a church, right? At a football game, things are kind of loud, so you might have to talk a little bit louder and raise your volume in order to be heard. Whereas if you were to speak at that same volume level that you are at the football game in a church, people would really look at you kind of funny, right? Because you're yelling inside this sort of sacred place. So the place that the conversation happens matters, and as I was saying earlier, the time matters as well, right? Because if it's like, let's say 5 o'clock, right? These people are supposed to be getting off of work, or if it's close to the end of the lecture period, maybe, people are going to be wondering when the heck the speaker is going to shut up so that they can go home, right? So time and place are really, really crucial to all of this as well. So as you can see, there's a lot happening in this transactional model of communication, but this is the most comprehensive explanation of what it is that's happening during a public speech.